Hey guys, it's Sabbath here. I just wanted to make a quick little patch overview on 1.02, which is looking to mainly just balance some weapons and particularly give some buffs to some weaker stuff that we're hopefully getting. So before we get into the actual stats and stuff, I'm gonna actually want to bring up the 5 main issues I currently have with PvP, I would say. Currently, I would say the first one is Assault Boost is too strong. This is a pretty common appearance. I actually think that stagger reduction from Assault Boost should just not be a thing, or at least a damage reduction, or the fact that you do more damage in Assault Boost. Like, something needs to get removed. Otherwise, it's too overloaded as a universal movement mechanic. Next up is the rifles and machine guns. They just don't do enough damage nor have enough range, so ricochet damage is so common for rifles, which you want to always space with. You always want to stay at a mid to long range with generally in AC games, but the problem is their idle range, in my opinion, just isn't long enough, and it feels like you actually have to be putting yourself in quite a bit of risk if you want to use it, as opposed to just using it as a consistent firing tool. And then machine guns, they're just outclassed by shotguns right now, as well as even handguns. It's one of the rare occasions where machine guns are not very good in an AC game. They definitely are weak. Now, what's not weak is the Zimmermans, which are probably the best weapon in the game overall, I'd say, just based on how easy it is to fit on a build. You don't have to dual wield it. It's excellent with just a single wield as well. Obviously, dual wielding it is probably your best, but just they're too strong to really justify overall. Even if they do have a couple of counters, it's just the combination of how much value they get along with assault boosting, they are just too strong right now in my opinion. Now, stun guns, they just do too much damage, which is probably the biggest counter to Zimmermans, if anything, funnily enough. I've been using stun guns a lot lately, and this honestly applies to both the back stun needle launcher and the stun guns on the arms. The direct hit adjustment is just ridiculous for them, especially the back weapons. And then lastly, this is more of a general thing that probably will change with more patches, but the current meta right now just seems to revolve around either zoning out people with all missiles or maybe like a shield build or something while you're permaflying, or you're just going to go a one-shot build with like Zimmermans or a melee weapon or like a strong back weapon with Zimmermans, for example, or the stun guns. But generally speaking, it feels a little bit stale and unbalanced. Now, don't get me wrong, AC PvP being unbalanced is like Tuesday for us. If anything, it's been better balanced than it's ever been, and the game literally just came out, but that doesn't mean it's perfect, and it doesn't mean that they can't make improvements, and that is exactly what we're getting right now with some of these changes, and it actually addresses this exact concern I had pretty well, which is that rifles and machine guns just aren't very good right now. Two staples of the AC series just are struggling to keep up, and with that, we got nothing from this patch but rifle and machine gun buffs from the looks of things. So the first one is going to be the Ransetsu RF. There's no real reason to use this in the previous patches. It just feels like it was outclassed by the Harris linear rifle, and as a constant source of damage, it was not really that special. The charge shot was a little inconsistent, even if it did more damage than the Harris at its peak, but generally speaking, it just didn't really have a role. So the changes here are just kind of giving it a bit of love, not really giving it a specialized role, but just something that will make it feel nicer to use, which is always welcome. You can see the attack power is going to go up by 224 from 194, which actually is a decent amount for something you're going to be firing consistently, especially since the charge shot is going to multiply that by 3. That's going to be nice. The decreased reload time is going to go nicely as well. It's going to go from 2 seconds to 1.8, which might not sound like a lot, but considering these are weapons you're going to be firing all the time, that will add up and make the weapon a little bit nicer to use. The rapid fire is also going to be a little bit better too, which is nice too. It's going to go up by 0.2 seconds, so from 1.3 shots per second to 1.5. And so I'm not sure where this is going to put it in the meta. I don't really know why you would use this still over the Harris, to be honest. I just feel like that's just the best rifle in the game. One of the few rifles that are actually good. But it definitely makes it nicer to try using, and I'll definitely give it a shot because I do love me rifles. Speaking of Ransetsus, though, we've got the AR variant, which is the fully 3-round burst one. This I'm really happy because I personally really like using this weapon, even if it's not very good in PvP. I personally find it actually pretty nice in PvE as just a general purpose weapon to deal with like smaller MTs or just as constant rate of fire. It's nice. So it's getting a pretty nice buff, actually. I would say it's gonna go by 62 times 3 to 77 times 3. Let me calculate how much that's gonna be overall. So it's going up by 42 damage overall for each burst fire, which I actually think is pretty nice. Again, this doesn't really solve the issue with assault rifles and rifles in general, where the ideal range feels like it's a little bit too low for what they're meant to do, which is to nickel and dime someone and keep their stagger meter at a stable, maybe just slowly rising level while not putting yourself in danger too much. But it is gonna make it a bit beefier of a move, and you'll have to respect it just a tiny bit more when you're trying to rush into someone with rifles. More importantly, though, what's really nice is that the reload time is actually going down by 0.5 seconds, which is a long time for pretty much any weapon, really, but especially something like a assault rifle. So I'm personally really excited to try out the Ransetsu. Now, next up is going to be the Curtis. There's going to be changes to the Curtis. It's going to be similar, just attack power and reload time, which, again, weapons of the assault rifle type are pretty underpowered when it comes to damage, so I can't really complain that most of these are just getting attack damage buffs overall. Also, obviously, reload time means it's going to have more consistent DPS. But I do think that recoil could be buffed as well, or again, the ideal range, because another issue that stems from these is that you actually need to have some good recoil control arms, which means you actually have to have something a bit heavier for the arms, which isn't necessarily awesome if you want to have, like, say, a mobile build that looks to nickel and dime from far away. There's actually a great little demonstration of this by Celtic Spear. Shoutouts to them. They showed off how with the starter arms, which, yeah, they don't have the best recoil control, but you can see just how much they stay off of their mark. It is just not a very good weapon when it comes to accuracy unless you have the proper arms. So next up is going to be to the Turner rifle, which is the starter rifle, so it is actually going to make the early game a little bit easier with this. I'm fine with that because the first chapter, I think most people can agree, is probably the hardest in the game. It's either that or 4. Man, a lot of that has to do with Balteus, because you feel very underpowered against Balteus compared to later attempts. And something like this would be very welcome. It also would make a starter AC only run easier, which I guess I can't really complain about. So that's going to be nice. The damage is going to go up actually by like 20%, so that's actually a big deal, which is awesome. And also the reload time is going to go down by 0.6 seconds, even more. So I think the Turner is going to feel really nice in the early game. I don't know if it's going to scale well compared to the other weapons still. It might still be a bit of a, just a starter rifle, so you're not going to use it much later on, but you never know. Definitely could see some things. Another thing, actually, that was discovered already for the patch is that the bullet speed has actually increased. Basically, what it's saying is that the bullet speed in velocity is increased, which is great because it means it's going to hit its mark more, which is exactly what you want from a rifle. You don't really want to necessarily focus so much on landing every single shot, where something like, I don't know, like a grenade launcher or a bazooka or a handgun, where you really have to time your shots. Assault rifles and those kind of things, especially the fully automatic ones, you really want to just fire it without worrying too much while focusing on your movement or something else, for example. So this is going to be a nice change overall. I think the turn is going to feel nice, and I don't know if this bullet speed change applies to more than just this rifle in particular. If it does, then that's a huge yippee moment. It would be awesome, but either way, it's going to make the turner feel nice regardless. So next up, the shutter rifle, the other rifle in the pack, and again, a damage increase. I do think the shutter is not the best feeling weapon compared to the Ransetsu or even the turner. I just feel like it's a little bit So I don't know. The Scudder, we'll see where it goes. I'll probably give it a shot. Alright, next up is to the machine guns. The Ludlow is getting a 6 damage buff. Keep in mind that machine guns fire very fast, so what might sound like a little bit of damage, that's actually pretty nice. I can actually check right now how much exactly that's... Yeah, so it's like going up by like 16%, which is a pretty nice performance buff overall, I would say. And machine guns, actually, if anything, they feel even worse than assault rifles, if you ask me. Especially considering you have to be so close to use them compared to the assault rifles. So to see this, more than anything else, is nice. Next is the Chen, my personal favorite machine gun to use, and this is getting more or less the same buffs. I'll say this one does feel better to use than the Ludlow already, but that's not to say that it's not welcome of a change. It also has more total rounds, which is great. I mean, the Chen never had a terrible ammo pool, so I think this total rounds thing is going to actually affect the Ludlow the most. Especially because the Ludlow, I've noticed, can't even like withstand the entirety of a Balteus fight. I've used it during that fight, and I would frequently run out of ammo unless I was like barely using it. So that's something that is really nice to see be touched upon. But I think the Ching is actually going to feel pretty nice on PvE. I don't know about PvP yet, but in PvE, I think it's actually going to be a pretty nice weapon altogether, because it's going down by quite a bit for reload time as well, so you're always going to have it doing damage at least more often, so that's nice. But I don't know, maybe I'll have to do a build with like Chang's only and like see how it is in PvE. Next up, it's going to be the etsujin. This is actually the last change of the patch as well. I've never really seen this ever used, so I'm glad to see some buffs overall. Again, it's by ×4, so that buff is actually pretty significant when it comes to attack damage. The most significant of all the machine guns, easily. The reload time is also going down by 0.5 seconds, so that reload time is actually very short, which is nice. I do think the magazine rounds could go higher. I don't think the total rounds is really the issue. I mean, it doesn't have a very good ammo pool, of course, but I just think having 6 intervals of fire with it, it just feels like it's not outputting enough before it has to reload. And yeah, the reload reduction will be nice, but I don't think that's necessarily gonna solve the issue in which it's always running out of ammo, you know? And so yeah, that's the changes from the look of things. These are of course just the stats. Things like bullet velocity aren't factored in by that. We did talk about the turner. Hopefully the other weapons will also follow suit. So ultimately I'm pretty happy with this patch. It again tackles that doesn't do enough damage. I don't know if it's enough. I'll have to test to see if those damage buffs are enough, because I mean they actually are by quite a bit. Again, like every single weapon I showcase got its damage buffed by at least 10%, which is really nice. But the range thing, we're gonna have to see how they perform compared to something with similar range as it and is a little bit more optimized for burst damage. I will keep you guys updated maybe and see where we go with that, but ultimately it seems like FromSoft are tackling the issues of the current PvP meta, and even PvE, some of the stuff is a problem in like Zimmerman. I mean, think about how many people have said this game is too easy because they use Zimmerman's or the stun needle launcher, for example. So to see this is nice. I hope Zimmerman's and stun guns do get nerfs. I think that would be nice. Assault boost is a universal change, so I wouldn't be surprised if that remains untouched, even if it really desperately needs to be. But yeah, so at the very least, they could probably just nerf the impact damage of Zimmerman's. Maybe make the Gatling guns a little bit heavier too, just so that you can't just slap it onto any build. So yeah, that's the patch. I know I rambled a lot, but hopefully got some points across, and hope you all have a good night. One more thing, actually, before the video ends. We also did learn that Balteus, Sea Spider, and Ibis are getting touched. Of course, Balteus is, I think, the main one that really needs to be touched as far as early game. Everyone else, I mean, these two, you're at a stage of the game where you're stronger, so they're not that big of an issue. Let's be real, they're all probably nerfs. There's no way that they're making these guys harder. So that's nice to see, but yeah, I mean, I think the game is going to get considerably easier for PvE between better rifles, which are pretty easy to use in PvE, I would say, as well as these bosses potentially getting nerfed, so you won't have any excuse to like die to Sea Spider anymore, for example, or Salt 240, which is nice. But we'll see how it is, because obviously this is just text. We don't know which attacks are adjusted yet. If I find it, I'll let you guys know, but for the time being, we'll see.